an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Elder Empire C, Book 1, Chapters 1, 2, and 3. In these chapters, we meet, we've met, but we meet Calder, Martin, and his crew. And I've gotta say, I like this guy's crew better than Shera's crew. Not that I don't love Shera and her people, but it's hard to relate to them. These guys, I like them. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to George for commissioning this episode. George is laughing at my pronunciation of cry cut, which is what I have never heard it said out loud. Is it supposed to be cricket? No, is it? God, I never even thought of that. It doesn't, why? It's a machine that cuts things. That's not what a cricket does. It doesn't have any relation. You know what? This is not on topic. I don't need to do this right now. I just, it caught my attention. I don't know what... my mind is blown. My whole self, my identity, it's at risk. I don't know what to do. I'm usually not that off on pronunciations, but this is one that not only did I not know, but even now that I know, it makes no sense to me and my brain rejects it. So I don't know what to do with that. I'm going to have to come back to it later. So this book, I'm really excited about this one. I don't know if, George, I haven't looked at the chart that you gave me about which chapters to read since I looked up what to do for this episode. Is this book around the same length as the other, or is it longer, shorter? Because for some reason this feels like a book that would have to be longer because of how many more people are involved in everything. But that doesn't necessarily have to be true. It's just something that I would expect based on the way this starts off. This is doing the same thing as of Shadow and Sea in that it's jumping back and forth in time. This one does it less than the other so far. I don't know if that will continue or not, but it seems like, as far as we are right now, the only flashback... I hesitate to call them that. I always feel like flashbacks are something that happens within a character's perspective in their moment of remembering rather than in a moment for the audience or the reader to view it. But I'm going to call them that just for the sake of it. The only thing that we get is him and his father attempting to rob this person and getting caught and him being sent to his mother. I cannot tell you how excited I am about that development. Oh, who is she? What's her deal? He literally says, he doesn't remember her face. And she's a couple of blocks away. And that is the kind of thing that is really wild when you are somebody who, can't imagine that sort of scenario. And somebody that I know and love was essentially abandoned by their parents. And yet their parents lived only a few blocks from the household where they wound up being raised. And their parents never came to see them, barely was involved in their lives. And at one point they were in the grocery store and passed them in an aisle, and their own mother did not recognize or acknowledge them at all. That was how little a relationship they had, despite being literally a 10 or 15 minute walk from one another's homes. So that is just some wild shit. And I am desperate to know why he knows who she is, but doesn't have this relationship. And it feels like she must be kind of a power of some kind, because there's a real sense here of her having like sent for him, and these people who are Imperial Guards, I think is what they're being called, right? They are either working for her, or at least she has some kind of command and sway, whether that's official or not. And I just can't wait to find out what that is all about. I have to one thing that I have been really appreciating about various fictions that I've been reading and watching is when an author or writer doesn't decide to completely dispense with parents. Because I feel like it's a real temptation in a lot of like YA literature, especially. They want to just focus on the lives of these like kids, teens, whatever. Some of them just, it's a regular kid living regular kid drama. Sometimes they have superpowers, but in almost all of them, the parents are like not a factor. And that's just not reality. There are people who are abandoned or whose parents have died, but that doesn't mean that they don't have an influence, an impact on their lives, you know? And I feel like, especially in stuff that's for YA people, I just don't really understand alienating your audience in such a way. These kids are probably living with, if not parents, then at least guardians who like watch over them and want to know where they are, and will be, you know, there will be consequences for behavior because of whether that is considered acceptable. And yet in books, it's sort of treated as like not really important or a big deal what your parents think or do. And it's very easy to lie to them or sneak out. And I think a lot of us know that's not as easy to pull off as television and movies have made us think it is. So just the fact that like Calder is in this crime with his father right away gives us a real like idea of how he has been raised. And then the fact that it's not that his mother just died and the two of them are just making ends meet. There is something very other going on here. And why doesn't the father encourage a relationship between the two? What's going on? I love this. So we'll get to the actual scene because obviously there's more detail going on there. But I'm going to start with chapter 1. So we're in the midst of this storm. And Calder gives a real sort of rapscallion energy here. I really enjoy, are you waiting for applause? And him saying, I do prefer an audience. And later on, he asks Andal if his wife is secure. And Andal just says, I'm afraid she's dead, sir. A fever took her in the night. What a weird joke to make. What? I have not got a handle on Andal at all, and I'm all right with it. I enjoy this character being a bit of a mystery. And I really enjoy, especially, this is something that can be done so clumsily. And it's done beautifully here. I think maybe because he waits to do it until chapter 3. I would love to know how he wrote these, like publication order. Did each trilogy get one book at a time, or did he publish one whole trilogy and then the next whole trilogy? And did he write the C books first or Shadow books first? George in the chat says Shadow is 377 and C is 406. Okay, so C is longer, not terribly much longer, but definitely a significant amount. He published them in sets, so always 2 at a time. Cool. Yeah, I can imagine it would be kind of harder to write one whole trilogy and then another. You'd sort of have to write them together, or you would lose track of timing and stuff and details, I'm sure. So in the third chapter, I said I would start from the beginning, but I'm totally not doing that. It's fine. I have a lot to cover. These 3 chapters are very packed with information. So I think I'm going to allow myself to jump around a little bit. Jump up and get down. The third chapter is when we get everybody introducing themselves or being introduced to Nibirius, who we don't see until the very end of the previous book. And I don't think it was clear that Nibirius himself... Did we know that the client himself was the one that was on the ship that they were thinking might stay in the captain's cabin? Or did we just know they had been sent on an assignment and Calder was expecting a guest? I'm pretty sure it's the latter, right? It's the second, that they knew that the captain was expecting a guest, probably thought he would stay in the captain's quarters, and they did not know, or maybe Yala knew and just didn't inform them of the whole thing. But the fact that Nibirius is involved on this trip is really, like, I don't know what to make of this. I'm tempted to say he's playing both sides, but it feels as if he was, like, being fairly open with the consultants in some ways about what he's been doing. So I cannot determine how much of this is, like, him being sly and how much is just that we as readers didn't necessarily have all of the information, you know? George says, I think we knew it was Nibirius. We knew it was Nibirius, but we didn't know Nibirius was the client. So, did we? So, like, Nibirius was just a guest that the captain was going to have, but we didn't know that that's, Berelius? What? Hold on. Sorry, guys. I'm getting confused in the chat here. Wait. Berelius at the end of the last book? So was Nibirius not the one that we met at the end of the last book? I thought that was. They're different people. I've been thinking they were the same guy the whole time. The final client was a different person, the head of the Alchemist Guild. I thought that was Nibirius. Oh, I got their names all mixed up. Shit. So then I had the wrong idea about this whole thing this entire time. I'm annoyed because I read this section twice and I was like really paying attention to that guy, wondering what it was that he was up to. And I just was like completely confused about who he was. All right. I'm going to have to like rethink all of that in my head now. Great. I'm sorry, guys. Their names are so like, they ring very similarly. And there's a similar energy to both of them in a way. Like they both just feel so expansive and excited about like violence and mayhem in a way that felt really similar to me. All right, well, you know, what can you do? So in the third chapter, though, when they are introducing themselves, it's a really great like device for us getting to know each of these characters as well. And like I said, oftentimes this sort of introduction is crammed into like the first chapter of a book or, you know, and it feels like, hey, here's the lineup. Here are the characters and what they are like. And it can feel very, it's the sort of thing where you understand why it's necessary. And so you roll with it as it's happening because you're like, yeah, I do need to get to know who these people are. But it can feel so without context in the universe itself that you don't get an impression of a lot of what it means. And it's hard to retain because of that. Does that make sense? Like you can't call it to mind later on. So the way that they are introduced to Nibirius later, with the context of some of them ducking questions, some of them being a little bit offended or weird about the way that he like approaches them and talks about things, some of them having clearly like complicated relationships with family or having a weird reaction to the name of a gunsmith, and then Calder makes up a name for Foster and calls him Duster. All of these little things are giving us just a taste of who these people are, but not enough to like feel like we're getting an info dump. It's just enough to make us go, what's that about? And get interested without it just being, here's a profile on this person. And because it's in context with all of the characters and their interactions with one another, it's a lot clearer to us as well, the opinions of other people in the universe of that group. At the very least, like what is expected versus the reaction that they actually get, which I just think that that's so important, because every universe, there are going to be groups of people who are seen as less than for a variety of reasons. It might be economic, it might be cultural, there might be some sort of historical baggage with a certain people, there might be a kind of like power or ability associated with them that makes people not trust them. And if you don't know that, and it's not just said to you, it can be difficult to understand why certain things go the way they do initially. And you grow to get it, but I think it's really helpful to have it done this way. The thing that I always think of, guys, is if you've played Skyrim, the character that I created, I didn't know anything about the universe, or I hadn't like looked into it or researched it at all. And I made a like dark elf, and I just completely did not know that a dark elf was going to get a like very different treatment from people in that universe. It would have been helpful to know that. You know, I didn't realize that that was going to be a bone of contention with people. And if you just tell me that it's in a story versus showing the way that somebody reacts, it's going to have a different vibe to me. Michael says Nibirius' name origin is a leader of demons. Checks out since he wants a heart. I guess. The thing is, like, well, we'll get there. Okay. So anyway, I just really appreciated this introduction, especially considering like we've seen a lot of these people, not all of them, but a lot of them, and the context of them outside of the point of view of somebody like Shera, who sees them simply as targets or as enemies, is very interesting to me. So the whole like fight here that this is starting off with in the storm is meant because they are trying to capture this creature. And as this is all happening, Calder is reading the ship and giving it sorts of instructions. And it's really like, it's an intense scene because he's simultaneously keeping track of everyone around him and also trying to manage this like massive, and he's clearly soulbound to this ship, I'm pretty sure. So it's just, there's a lot happening here, and it's kept remarkably organized the way that it's written. And what they're trying to capture, I'm trying to find the name of it because I can't remember. But let's see, the chimera they hunted wasn't particularly dangerous on its own, but it only flew during lightning storms. They'd been tracking this one for weeks, and if it got away this time, he might decide to mutiny against himself. Those thunderlights had cost him 100 gold marks apiece. And the copper rods that they have are invested to attract lightning. He only hoped they would work soon, so he didn't have to spend any more time in this weather than necessary. So, they were glass bulbs filled with alchemical formula that produced bright, steady light. But unlike quick lamps, which glowed for a few years and had to be replaced, these thunderlights would work as long as they had lightning to recharge them. So the storm wing, that's what it's called, flies through, and they have to take a shot at it. And the shot misses. And Foster is trying to load the red shot before he actually takes it, and it's taking longer than he intended. And everybody's sort of irritated with him. So when he finally does take the shot and misses, Calder is just like, oh my God, this is going to be a nightmare. He's getting really, really irritated. And these things, like, if they get injured in a certain way, can be very dangerous. So red shot, which is what they're using, contains tranquilizers. So that storm wings just essentially get confused and try and collect themselves by floating on the surface of the water for a few moments, which makes it a lot easier to catch them. Now they had a confused, pain-enraged, hallucinating monster striking at them with a tail that caused explosions, and they had to fight it in the middle of a storm. Is this tail that causes explosions what's her face in the wrappings uses as a weapon later? Like, it's not obviously this creature's tail specifically, unless it is. But I don't think so. I think it just seems like she was already soulbound to a Stormwing tail weapon. Does that sound right? Because it's tail that causes explosions. I was like, that's ringing a bell for me. George says yes. Hey, ding, ding, ding. A one for me. I can't remember who Nibirius is, but I got that. He abandoned the wheel, hopping down to stand beside Andal. He presses his palm to the deck, and this is when he calls to the Elder and its hand, and it reaches up from underneath the water. This is so wild to read now that we know how dangerous these things are, and that he is like connected with the ship that it is. So he like soulbound to the ship, not to the Elder, right? Because as I think it was said that if you soulbind yourself to an Elder, there's a pretty great likelihood that you're going to go crazy. It's like possible in theory, but it just doesn't end well most of the time. In the midst of this is when Shuffles shows up. Guys, I cannot handle that this fucking creature is called Shuffles. When he says, Shuffles, what are you? I was like, I'm sorry, excuse me? I was out for a walk, and I think my mouth, like, fell open as I walked down the middle of the street. Shuffles. No, that's what you call a little yappy dog. Which, I mean, I guess he describes him as sort of like a parrot. And that he tends to repeat the most disturbing words out of, like, the sentences that he just heard. Which, that's just so upsetting in so many ways, but this is hilarious. Long story short, the Elder, bound to the ship, and his name is Leathatan, tears its prey apart. One wing came off in each hand, spattering the ship's decks with droplets of shining yellow blood. And Calder's heart sank as Foster fought his way free of the line, sending a futile kick at his own cannon. You could not wait one more second for me to line up another shot. Calder poured the need for the Stormwing, his desperation to bring back something to sell, and his determination to extract the Chimera's precious fluid. Usually that worked, though sometimes he had to throw in a bribe. And all of a sudden, the tail and spine land on the deck. I don't know why this cracks me up so bad, but the thing is just like, here, and just chucks it onto the deck of the ship. That just, it did what he asked, and that is great. And, we needed something. But that, for some reason, made me laugh so hard that this thing is just like feeling his desperation and is like, oh, fine, here, whatever. Just picturing it being just tired and like, you know what? I want to go back to napping anyway. So sure, take it, whatever. So the Bellowing Horror is what he is calling Shuffles on, like, in his head, or like sort of officially. And he calls it harmless. And I'm like, I'm sorry, buddy, but I don't really trust your judgment on this. Like, I'm sure that it hasn't done anything shitty, like, yet, or maybe ever. But, there's just a sort of vibe here with this thing that I feel like you just maybe don't know what it can do, and you're erring on the side of like, oh, it's kind of cute or adorable. Why is it here? Is it like related to the Elder strapped to the ship? Why does he have this thing at all? So he grinned, placing his hat back on his head, and bowed in the Leathatan's direction. The giant was settling beneath the waves, hissing as it disappeared under the water. Calder wasn't sure he could count Leathaten as an ally exactly, but certainly as an asset. It had agreed to serve him for a short time, but a short time to the ancient being could extend into the lives of Calder's grandchildren. He turned the wheel, sending his intent down, and the Leathaten obediently dragged the ship along, away from the flashes of lightning. And Calder is just like, thank fucking God. All we have been doing is chasing storms. I cannot wait for some sunshine. And this is when Urziah comes up, and it turns out he's the ship's cook. I'm just super bummed, you guys, reading this like after knowing that Urziah doesn't make it. Or at least it doesn't look like he made it. Like, I don't know what's going to wind up happening, but it seems pretty clear he's dead, unless there's a way to revive him that we don't know about. And I just felt sad here over knowing that he's very good-natured, you know? And he's just, his days are numbered, man. I don't like it. So this is when Jyrene comes up. And Jyrene is smiling in a way that makes Calder really nervous. She is somebody who loves danger and doesn't seem to have the same kind of, I don't want to say like survival instinct exactly. It seems more like she isn't as worried about death as other people, or at least as Calder. I don't know what that means or what her deal is exactly. You know, like we get a hint that there's something about where her parents come from and the tattoos that she has on her that is significant, but we don't know what that is. And her courting danger comes up several times. So she tells Calder, please come down into the hold. You aren't going to believe this. And at first he's like, oh my God, what is down there? What are you doing? And she's like, no, I swear it's nothing that you're going to have to shoot. Just come and see. I didn't think this was possible. And that lures him down. And there is a note that she says she saw being written on the wall, like burned into the wood of the wall as it was like being written. Like an invisible pen was hovering over. And it says, Calder, hope this mysterious message finds you well. I love that they specifically say that. You know, it's like one step away from being like, I hope that this really impressive little piece of magic is knocking your socks off here. I just learned how to do this, and it's going to blow the pants off certain people back in the capital. If you see it first, show it to Jyrene. She appreciates a touch of theater. The guild has a new client. A pair of witnesses wants you to take them to a particular island to pick up some relic. This could be huge, Calder. Not just for you, but for the Empire and for the Emperor. And he pauses here and then goes back to it. By the way, this will be big for you. The chronicler was in charge of finance in the Imperial Palace. He wants me to tell you that if you're successful, you will, quote, sleep under sheets of golden silk in the cabin of your flagship at the head of your brand new fleet. His words. So I suggest you get your leaky tub and your flea-bitten crew back to port before he comes to his senses and hires someone else. Cheska. So Cheska is head of the Navigators Guild, as we find out later. And she doesn't tell him all about this assignment, which later when he actually meets Nibirius and his Silent One, they act all surprised that Cheska didn't tell him everything. And I couldn't tell whether that was like a legitimate surprise or if he didn't want Calder to know the details and sort of like feigned surprise so as to push this quickly along. I kind of got the sense that was like all an act and that she wasn't supposed to have told them more, that he had told her he would like handle talking to Calder about it himself, and then was just like, well, you know, I'll tell you once we're on board kind of thing, just trying to really push things. So Calder heads back, and then we go into chapter 2, and we are in the past, 13 years earlier, and we get to see what the deal is with Calder and how he grew up. So he is in this guy's house. As we find out later, the house that they're in, this guy has plenty of money and really like expensive objects and curiosities that are worth a fair amount of money. However, the dude is not great at crime, and he actually makes a receipt of sale of this like illegally traded object, which either he is a lot stupider than he seemed at the time, or that was sort of trumped up and not actually real. And I kind of felt like the latter. I just didn't see that this dude who seems so shrewd in this scene would be taken in, like, and would do something that foolish. But I don't know, maybe, you know, he's good at parts of it and not great at others. So the two of them are posing as the Fair Streets. A father and son, they are, but you know, a father and son that are wearing like matching suits and dressed in like even down to the way that their hair is slicked back. Their hair is slicked in the same direction. Everything about them is him being a sort of mini-me to his father. And the goal is for him to make enough of like a sort of negative impression on Mr. Dunwood that he be given an excuse to like leave the room, because after doing his reading, he's sort of dazed and he needs a moment. So like they sort of set this up that he reads the object and then is immediately sent outside. So he holds it together just long enough to get out of the room where he can sort of begin to like shake and breathe hard and get through the visions that come to him from this thing. I am not, you know, familiar enough with how things work in this world, but you get the impression that Calder is unusually gifted at what he can do. It doesn't seem like this is standard operating procedure for a reader of his age. He feels like he's like on par with Lucan, and it really seemed like Lucan was particularly unusual. So that really makes me wonder how the two of them are going to function together, because now, you know, they have a common enemy, as Calder says, and I am extremely curious what they are going to either learn from one another or if they will be threatened by one another. I don't know, but I'm very interested in all of this. So the whole thing is all over a, what do you call it? Quill. Guys, have you guys watched The Circle? The second season of The Circle on Netflix? Because if you haven't, there's this amazing moment where people have to write like a little poem, and they get graded on how good their poems are, and you get given like a present as a prize, like a little sort of trophy if you win the most votes for your poem. And it's so adorable. Two people win, and one of them is this dude who opens and he's like, oh, cool, it's a quill. And it's like, you know, made of gold. And then the girl who opens it, she's really, really not smart. I adored her, but she was really, really not smart. And she opens it and just goes, oh, look, it's a golden feather. And I was just like, girl, oh my God. That's all I could think of in this scene, was just like, he picks it up at one point and it's just like, it doesn't look like much. And I just wanted him to be like, what's this feather? So yeah, they distract this dude long enough that Calder can pick it up, because he is trying to judge for himself if it is legitimate. And they pretend they're going to buy it. I assume that they have like a fake account the money's being drawn on, or they give like fake currency. I don't know. But he is verifying whether it's real and sees a bunch of visions. He does this also with the desk at one point. And it is very clear that this shit was indeed real and used by the Emperor. And the impact of those visions, because this thing is 500 years old, really do a number on him. And it takes a little bit of time for him to recover once he's out of the room. And I just really love this dude's reaction with just his father. It's like, he's been an elder spawn nightmare since his mother passed. And Dunwood says, then why don't we let him be someone else's nightmare for a time? Which I feel like all of us have met somebody who we want to say that about their child. Let them be someone else's nightmare for a little while, okay? How about they just, get the fuck out of here, because I hate them. So his father comes out and is like, well, shit, that was real then, huh? And they go back that evening. They are dressed as delivery guys. They have boxes and, a fake delivery order, the whole thing, in case, if anybody is to notice them, that they can believably be like, oh, well, they just left the door open and we were just delivering this thing. We thought they did that on purpose. And they have this very, very old key, which apparently has either been invested or awakened to such a degree that you literally tap the key against any lock and it just opens. Which, understandably, in their line of work, his dad is just like, yeah, we're not selling that. Of course you're not selling that. What? That's insane. And that is I think he describes it as the only other, let's see, what is it that he says? The only other, emperor owned or something like that. I'm trying to find the spot. The quill could put them in silk suits and cigars for a decade. There's something about knowing that they smoke cigars that made me laugh. Here it is. The only genuine imperial artifact they'd located up to this point. So I don't know if that, if an imperial artifact means that it was specifically owned by the emperor, himself, or just that it was, owned by staff of the emperor and, in his household. But the way that they're describing this is, the fact that it was the emperor's. I just get the sense that it was actually his specifically. And wild. I mean, it never occurred to me what a fucking free-for-all there would be for the emperor's possessions after he died. Yeah. Oh my God. This is just the kind of shit that people dream about. So oh, man, that must have been chaos. So they go in and they're about to take the quill out of its what do you call it? Safe under the desk, and the safe's open and the key's gone, and Calder is like, fuck. Oh my God. So a squad of monsters marched through the door. These descriptions. One of the men looked ordinary except for his arms, which were covered in fur like a bear's. Claws tipped each of his fingers. Which I just really want to know, how do you function in regular life with hands like that? Another, a woman, grabbed Roderick and forced him against the desk. She hissed in his face, revealing fangs like a snake's. Woo! A parade of horrors spread out over the room, a display of human and chimera melding. One of the men lashed a tail, while another stared straight at Calder with the two wide eyes of a giant owl. That's when Calder realized what they all had in common. They wore the same red and black pressed uniform, tailored to meet their unique anatomical requirements and marked with a crest. So, I don't know if they are all, if all Imperial Guards have to be Chimera enhanced, I guess is the word. Or if that is just, tends to be the case. Maybe you join the Imperial Guard and you're full human, and then everybody else has these cool Chimera alterations and you're just like, man, you know what? I'm going to do it too. Or maybe the Emperor was like, no people can keep up with me. So I'm going to need you all to get altered in order to even be up to my standards, because that was how he was with Maya. So I guess it would make sense if he was like that with Imperial guards as well. Although, you know, yeah, I don't know. And I'm realizing too, if this is like 13 years ago, the Emperor is still alive here, right? So I'm thinking that like these artifacts are things that got looted, but either they were stolen from him or discarded by him and collected by people who like know what the value of these items could be otherwise. Anyway, so here comes their leader, a bone thin with only a brush of white hair on his head and the pinched look of someone who consumed food only as fuel for his body. He wore his Imperial Guard uniform as though it had been glued to his skin. A set of gills rode on either side of his neck, flapping in the air. Nope. Don't like that. And this dude calls them Martin. He knows their real name. Knows all about them, evidently. And this is when he says, bill of sale. We received it from Mr. Dunwood not an hour ago. A bill of sale? Carl Dunwood is not the greatest criminal mastermind the Empire has ever seen. And I was just like, ah, man, is that real? Like, come on. And why did they receive it from him? Like, they must have raided the place and just got this information. I don't know. And clearly, they didn't go after them for that. They laid this trap knowing that they were going to come in after hours to try and steal it, which I found interesting. The whole thing, I'm very curious how much they knew and where they got this information from. And Roderick tries to be like, well, we can give you information about Dunwood. Watch Leader Fitch reached up to the mantelpiece and pulled down a pocket watch, popping it open. I extracted a penalty from Mr. Dunwood once before on the understanding that I never hear from him again. I do not repeat myself. From somewhere outside, a shout rose, followed by a pistol shot. Fitch snapped the watch closed. Right on time. Woo! Cold-blooded. I like it. So this is when Roderick comes lunging for Calder and is like, no, don't put my son in prison. He's too young. And he drops the key into Calder's pocket, which, dope. Dad's a quick thinker. Appreciate you. I don't know what's going to happen to you, Dad, but you're a good father who's putting your son first, and we all admire that, and pour one out. I don't know if he's going to survive this, but I kind of feel like no. And they take him away, and they say something real fucking sinister about how, don't worry, your son's in good hands. And Calder is like, okay, don't love the sound of that. And apparently he has heard a lot of really terrible stories about what happens at, orphanages and whatnot. Like when you don't have anybody to advocate for you, as in society, people will abuse you. Apparently, they'll be sold off to fucking alchemists to do experiments. And he's just really genuinely beginning to panic here. They make him get undressed, and I was kind of like, what's happening here? I got a little bit concerned. It turns out that they're just going to search him. And he does something. I love this so much. He focused on the pocket around the key. Hide it, hide it, hide it, hide it. This is so cool. He just keeps doing that with the pocket, and it works. The pocket is overlooked, and he does his part as well, crying and sort of stumbling and just trying to sort of distract the person who's doing the searching. But nevertheless, I don't know how much of these pockets were already invested with the intent to hide things, but regardless, this is just really cool. Oh, also, guys, there's this moment. Hold on. I gotta find this. Here it is. The man with the bare arms patted him down, checking for alchemist-created pockets of fake skin. I'm sorry, excuse me? Ugh. Gross. I mean, I'm sure that's so handy. Like, don't get me wrong, that's genius. But, oh my God. And can you imagine, like, you don't have pockets of fake skin, but somebody just keeps on kind of, like, poking weirdly to try and, like, find... Oh, I hate it. Ugh, I hate it so much. Okay, anyway. So he puts his clothes back on, and he says, "Where are you taking me?" And Fitch says, "To your mother." And then we go to chapter 3. And we see Calder repairing the testament. Okay, this is really dope. And I love that even he is like, how does like a regular person repair their ship? Because that must be a big pain in the ass. Yes. Once he had set the boards where he wanted them, he invested them as part of the ship, reading the whole to make sure that the ship accepted its new addition. When he had finished nailing the boards more or less in place, he rested his fingers against the deck and sent a command to his soul-bound vessel. Okay, yes, so yeah, he is soul-bound to this. I somehow missed like that specifically being said. The testament grew together, merging its deck with the new planks into a seamless whole. The new patch was a slightly lighter color, but otherwise indistinguishable from the rest. Or the other repairs Calder had made over the years. I really want to know, what happens if something happens to a ship? If you're soulbound to a vessel, and that vessel is destroyed, does it hurt you? I think it must, because he says, like, the crash that happens against the ship, he feels it like a physical pain. So, that sounds like, I don't know, kind of a raw deal. Like, I can understand the advantages, of course, they're very obvious, but also, like, ships are just, they get destroyed so easily, you know? I feel like it's such a more dangerous object to be bound to than, like, a knife, like Shera. You know? The likelihood of something significant happening to that, I don't know. Although I'm sure, like, the fact that it is invested and he's soulbound to it makes it more resilient. I don't know, though. It just it feels like too much risk. I don't like it. So a navigator's crew was incredibly small thanks to the captain's control over his ship. This was one of the reasons why the Guild remained the only force capable of crossing the Aeon Sea at will, and why its navigators tended to amass huge personal fortunes. One of the reasons. So, he has gotten a note that just says, "Prepare for our arrival at sundown." And he has not gotten, I should remind everybody, the information on what this trip is, or, like, really any additional notification of anything. By the time they leave, all he knows is, like, we're going to an island where there's something valuable. But nobody is aware this guy is after a heart specifically. No, he hasn't said those words. And there's a reaction when he says something about how we need a new emperor. Like, everybody else is, they were already on that page. And I don't know if, like, were they already trying to make Calder an emperor? Because we see that he has the crown later on. Does he have it already at this point in time? Or does he, like, get his hands on it eventually? Calder does not strike me as somebody who would want to be an emperor. I know that he's the one that's wearing the crown, but there's a vibe for me of that just being a moment of, like, necessity. Because he's saving his own wife. And so he's like, no, I'm going to do this. But I just can't feel like Calder is after this for himself. Is it Andal? Is he going to be me? I don't know. Okay. Anyway. this is when, we have this moment, let's see, did you get it straight from the source? From Cheska's messenger, the girl with the evil eye. Andal rubbed his silver amulet as if for luck. It was carved with the white sun crest of the Luminian Order. Some believed that wearing such a symbol would bring the blessing and protection of the unknown god. Of course, the amulet hadn't landed Andal anywhere better than a ship exiled to the Aeon. What is the evil eye? What does that mean? I mean, I'm not supposed to know by now, but I'm very curious. So, at this point, they see this guy coming. Calder says something like, Andal is like, why do you think it's them? And Calder's like, because they're a couple of fucking weirdos, man. Look at them. Everybody on this dock looks normal. And we're looking for somebody that is out of their mind enough to hire us for some crazy expensive job. Who do you think it's going to be? And the dude's wearing a bright red suit, and the woman is wrapped in bandages like a body prepared for burial. Wisps of black hair stuck out of the bandages over her head, and she wore an overcoat 2 or 3 sizes too large. In one hand she carried a gilded wooden case, and the other was wrapped around a full-size traveler's case. I am thinking the gilded case is the one that has her whip in it, and that's the one that she doesn't want to give up when he tries to take her luggage for her. So he is guild chronicler and one-time keeper of the Imperial Palace Treasury. This is my silent one, Tristania. And he's like, show us to our bunk. And Calder's like, whoa, pump the brakes, buddy. I did not agree to this job. I don't even know what it is yet. What's going on? Did Captain Bennett not tell you? I should have realized. Forgive me. She didn't strike me as the type to see her work through to the end. What does that mean? And immediately we get, one did not rise to become head of an imperial guild by leaving work unfinished. Cheska would shirk almost anything else, but she took her job seriously. He imagined the look on her face if she had heard Nibiria's opinion of her, and the thought brought him a warm smile, which either he doesn't like her much, or it's just the idea of her being irritable over it that he enjoys, and they actually do get along. It's unclear to me. It seemed like from her note to him, like that was, burned into the ship side, it seemed like they liked each other well enough, but, they may have a mildly adversarial relationship. And I want to know why Nibiria says she didn't strike me as the type to see her work through to the end. Why does he think that? And Calder just he says, you're an excellent judge of character, despite the fact that he knows this isn't true. So I don't know. This whole little bit confused me here. But anyway, the Emperor's personal finances were much more interesting than simple piles of silver marks. They included the location of several items of value, including, you might say, buried treasure. I mean, you might say, but should you? I don't feel like that's the way to describe this at all. Personally, I don't. It feels really like not true. I mean, technically it's true, but all right, I guess. And this is when he promises 10,000 gold marks, which is the equivalent of 1 million marks. And Calder is just like, what? Like, there's just a moment where his brain sort of short circuits. I love later on when his wife joins up with them and he tells her they're paying us 10 million gold marks. And she's like, oh, that's very generous. And then he's like, and they said there'll be danger. And she's like, word? Like, the gold does not make an impression, really. She's pleased about it in an abstract sort of way. But once she's told that you may die, she's just like, oh, sign me the fuck up. Yes. And I was just like, girl, I don't get you. What's up with you? What's over there? She has to, come from money. Only people who grew up with money just don't care about money. You know what I mean? Like, she has to have no worries personally about her livelihood being looked after. I have to assume. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe she's like a monk and she just doesn't care for material things. I don't know. Oh yeah, and also Nibirius asks about where she is before she shows up, and Calder's like, she's visiting her family, which means I should be able to see her right now. He spotted a woman in a simple blue dress pushing through the others as though each and every person had offended her. I really want to know what the deal is with her and her family, because she's clearly like irritable. She winds up warming up, but something's up with her family. And so Nibirius is shown to the captain's cabin, where Calder offers for them to stay. And Nibirius is like, this is really nice, but don't you sleep here? And Calder's like, oh, here they go. They're going to do the whole, we couldn't possibly. And then they're just going to take it anyway. But they don't. And I was like, Nibirius, do you know that since the consultants have been called in on this, that they're probably going to assume this is where you're staying? Like, there was a vibe to me of him being aware this was not the place. And he also kind of exchanges a look with Tristania. So I think she's sort of like, nah, we should not stay here. So they go to the other spot, and Calder has a moment of being like, I think I expect a discount. Like, come on. And then he tips them a gold mark for like being shown to his room, and Calder's just like, okay, never mind. I guess they are not going to try and like cheap out on this. So this is when we get the introductions of everyone. Urziah, whom we have met already. His outfit is described here with a little bit more detail. And I didn't, even his boots didn't match. I don't know if I remembered that being said, but I find that really funny for some reason. Anytime somebody wears mismatched shoes, I'm always just like, what is that like? Do you guys remember being a kid and like not noticing if you'd put two different shoes on accidentally? As a little kid, I remember doing that a couple times and going outside and being like, oh. But, you know, as an adult, it's just immediately like, what is this? No, you just, you know, you're so used to things. So this is when he also explains that like the axe that he used, people said that it looked like he was cutting wood. So he eventually got the name Woodsman, and there are worse names. I was meant to die there. The captain saved me, and now I will die aboard his ship. And Calder's like, okay, let's not talk about dying anymore. And of course, you've met my wife, Gyrene, who he calls Jerry. I really, for some reason, like was touched by the little nickname. I really liked that. Michael says, shoes you notice, socks you don't. That depends. I can notice socks, but I have some very, very different socks. I've got my sweat socks. I've got my big fluffy like Christmas socks. I've got sweat socks that come up to my ankle, and then ones that are like no-show socks. I've got a variety of socks. But Owen does wear mismatched socks a fair amount. So maybe guys get like fewer variety of sock. So Jerry is asked where her family hails from. My father and mother came to the capital from Vandenyas before I was born. And he points to the tattoos that cover apparently most of the left side of her body and is like, well, you carry those lines, which means they have to have been important. And she just completely goes, well, what about you? Are you also from Vandenya? And he's like, well, yeah. And Calder winds up stepping in and introducing Petal to sort of cover for the fact that she definitely did not answer the question. And I'm like, what's happening with her? I want to know. Evidently she's soulbound, and like people didn't know. It wasn't in the file that Shera had, you know? So this Petal twitches her head when she hears her name, but says nothing. Introduce yourself, Petal, Andal said. The alchemist shook her head, her hair shaking like a tree in a high wind. And I'm really wondering if she is, like, meant to be somebody who's on the spectrum, or if she's just exceptionally shy. The way that she's described as hyperfixating, when, you know, she's like, I think she's milking some fluid from the storm wing, made me think that she might be on the spectrum somehow. And her fork slides from her plate and tumbles toward the deck. Suddenly, Tristania was there, the fork in one bandaged hand and her coat settling behind her like a bat's wings. The whole crew jerked back, including Petal. Urziah raised his hatchet on instinct, then laughed and put the weapon back down. Tristania placed the fork carefully back on the other woman's plate. She reached out, smoothing Petal's dress, and with a few quick strokes tamed the alchemist's hair. Petal's eyes stared out as if from a cave, wide and unblinking. Okay, I ship Petal and Tristania officially. I don't know why this is all it took, but there goes a couple that, like, I want to get together. They both have their like weird thing going on that sort of makes them seem like they are isolated from the rest of the group in a very specific way. And there is something about Tristania's treatment of her that makes me feel like she's being really compassionate and sort of like understands Petal somehow. I don't know if it's because she also is, you know, like shy, or if she also has trouble relating to people or what. But there's something about this that I was just like, all right, you two are a couple, like officially. I don't know. It's just there it is in my head. And Nibirius like just acts like this didn't happen. And it's like, oh, okay, so Petal's an alchemist. Was she trained in Canitalia then? And Calder's like, she's self-trained, but she's very good. She has enough experience to match any 3 guild alchemists and paranoia to match any 12, he thought. And I'm like, paranoia? Why? And then it got me rethinking, well, what if she's just traumatized? What if she's been through some shit? Which, you know, I mean, maybe that's part of why she so retreats within herself. But yeah, whatever it is, there's just a vibe between her and Tristania that make me feel like they get each other. Tristania was self-taught as well, in a manner of speaking, and in a Canitalian laboratory, no less. Perhaps because she wore such a strange outfit without a hint of shame or self-consciousness, or because she was a member of the Guild of Witnesses, but Calder had the immediate impression that she would make a solid, dependable ally. Same. And then Calder's like, I don't trust this fucking Nibirius guy, though. But also, I don't have to trust him, so I guess it's fine. Like, there's a real sense coming off of Calder, like, this guy's clearly up to no good, but, like, we're all up to no good, so I guess it doesn't matter. I just gotta keep kind of an eye on him. So this is when Andal is, like, introduced, and Nibirius says, a Luminian? Really? How did a man like yourself end up in such company? And he seems irritated by this question. And Nibirius says, I didn't mean to offend you. Very few have the courage to turn against the Luminians and their beliefs. I don't think I said anything about their beliefs. True enough, true enough. And then he just like moves on, and I was like, ooh, that all felt very prickly. What's happening? So then he asks, what about your gunner? And he turns, and Foster is just gone. And Calder's like, oh, Foster, this is so rude. You can't be like this. But he covers for him. And this is when Nibirius pulls out his gun and says, I have 2 pieces here I'd like to discuss with him. They're Dalton Foster originals. A sound rang out like a muffled bell as Foster hit his head on the inside of the cannon. Is that him? Did he make these? And everybody starts laughing. And he notices that everybody's reacting and is like, what is up? And Jerry says, no, a private joke. Our gunner was once an admirer of Dalton Foster's, that's all. But his opinion changed, and now we try not to mention that name at all. And this is when Calder's like, his name's Duster. Duster is his name? Certainly, that's his name. And everybody's like, Yeah, definitely his name. And I'm like, why? Why? What does it mean? All of this is very intriguing. So this is when he brings up the whole thing about the Empire holding together just like barely, and people talking about secession. And finally he says, we need an emperor once again. And everybody kind of freezes. And Calder thinks, how much does he know? How much can he know? Did he hire us because of Cheska's recommendation, or is there something else? And if there is, how'd he find out? Does Cheska know? And I'm like, what? Does she know what? And he brings up the consultants, and apparently the, like, gardeners don't have as much of a reputation as I sort of expected. They have no concerns about the consultants until Nibirius is like, I'm serious, guys. You should not take them lightly. They fuck people up. And he gives a bunch of examples, and they're just kind of like, yes. And he's like, all right, but I think you're going to find out. And I'm just really excited to see from Calder's perspective when Shera attacks and how he sees it, because I have to assume she's going to seem extremely intimidating. And he says, I don't mean to imply they never lose, only that when they do, they have ways of making sure no one ever hears about it. To me, that's plenty frightening. So this is when he's like, is it safe to say that at least one of you is soul-bound? And practically fucking everybody, they're all just like, yeah. Yeah, one of us is, at least. And all of a sudden, here comes Shuffles busting out of a fucking, like, trap door, like some kind of creature in a medieval pantomime. And that's the end of the chapter. So, all right. I am going to wrap up. I'm over time as usual, but I'm very excited. Thank you again very much to George for commissioning this. I really appreciate it. I'm having a lot of fun. I hope you guys are enjoying the coverage. Don't forget to join the Discord. There is a spoiler chat for Elder Empire that I am not allowed into, so you can go there and chat amongst yourselves about the very bad, untrue predictions I'm making. And yeah, that's about it. I hope that you guys have been enjoying, and I will see you soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.